Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's live discussion on House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 3, The Burning Mill. Joined here by two guests who we all chose very similar screen names. um, Joining me first, of course, my sister Alyssa Rivers.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't get the reference, Alice Rivers, spelled Alys, is the name of the creepy woman who's lurking around Harrenhal and who says the creepy things to Damon. They haven't named her yet on the show. She's a book character, but they will name her soon enough. And all you have to do is add an extra S and an A to her name. And there you go. That's my name this week.
All right, and Harrenhal D, thanks so much for joining.
You're welcome. Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, what's the clever thing to come up with? Is it going to be a Team Black? Is it going to be? And well, I guess we all kind of drifted to the same area. So yeah, Harrenhal D or Harrenhald. I've been Harrenhald. I don't know. Sounds like something that somebody might say or not, probably. But yes, excited to jump in tonight's episode or last night.
Be kind of like Scrooged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would one be Harrenhald?
Sounds rather personal, actually.
I think Damon was Harrenhald in this episode.
Okay.
Well, I'm sure we will get into that.
Yes, we will. So, Darrin, let's start with you because you weren't here last week. So, if you want to give some quick thoughts on last week's episode and roll that right into this week's episode, overall thoughts.
Yeah, I had some personal stuff to take care of last week, and to be honest, I'm actually glad to come back this week as opposed to last week, because I did not, despite I know you really enjoyed the episode, Mark. I didn't get a chance to catch the whole thing, but I did get to see a little bit of your review. I am starting to get a little frustrated with the show to a certain extent. I believe, I had talked about the first episode being kind of the setup. You've got to do that because the first, season of the episode, but that all of last season felt like setup to get ready to the war. And then last week, or, episode 1 was, okay, we got to set our pieces to get ready and then it's time for war. And then last week kind of like, all right, so we got to move these pieces, get this stuff set up, and then it's going to be time for war. And then we get tonight and it's like, I'm starting to feel that the Monty Python bit where Lancelot keeps running towards the castle and it just keeps repeating over and over again. So I was a little frustrated with last week, and I've got to say it has nothing to do with production. It has nothing to do with scenes or actors or energy. I mean, the scene between Rhaenyra and Daemon last week, there was a lot of great, powerful stuff in with this. But it's starting to feel like and I can't say filler because there's story happening, but it feels like everything's getting kind of stretched out. Like the anticipation is starting to get a little annoying to me. So I like that this week we at least got the start and end of a battle, but not the actual battle. And that started getting some move things. And there was a few other stuff. We got the Harrenhal bit and we got some great dragons chasing horses and so on, which was nice. But I do have a certain frustration with just like, okay, are we going to get on with this? Because we're almost halfway through the season. It's only 8 episodes this season. And I feel like, is it just going to be like the second to last one, like they did before, is going to be the big battle? And then everything else is just going to be set up and moving people around. I don't know.
Without giving anything away or saying anything, I think you're going to like next week's episode. That's all I'm going to say.
The preview was encouraging. I do have to say that.
But I see where you're coming from, and I actually feel kind of maybe not to the extent, but a little bit similar. Watching it, I'm kind of like, come on, get on to it. Let's get to the stuff. But I feel like once I've seen the whole season and I watch it again, it's going to make sense. Like it's all going to be like, oh, I see. This is why they need to do this, and it's going to fit together perfectly. But at the moment, I am being a little impatient. Well, particularly because I read the books and I know what's coming, and I can't wait. But I think they're necessary building blocks, and I actually liked last week's episode much better than this week's one because there was more like powerful scenes, and like the Eric Arc stuff at the end to me was like absolutely brilliant. But that's not to say I didn't like this week's episode. I absolutely did, but it was a bit more sort of setup, I should say. As you say, I wouldn't use the term filler either. But anyway, Alyssa, your thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I'm with you, Mark. I liked last week's a lot better. This week was easily my least favorite, but I still liked it. I mean, it was we talked about this, and I won't get into spoilers, but in the spoiler section we had last week, I was talking about what are they even going to do in episode 3, because I knew episode 1 was Blood and Cheese. The episode 2 was going to be the Eric Arc thing, which I also loved. But it's because I read in the book and I was really looking forward to seeing how they were going to do it. And the Eric Arc thing, and then I know it's coming episode 4, so I'm like, what is episode 3 even going to be? It's just probably going to be putting chess pieces on the board, setting them up, and getting ready for the really entering the war. So I was kind of expecting it to be that way, so that's why I don't hate it. But still, like it pales in comparison to the first 2 episodes for me. But again, I think that when we look back at the season as a whole, I think we'll see this as a necessary thing. We all chose names for Harrenhal, but really, I think the centerpiece for this episode was that ending scene, and I just couldn't think of a good name for that scene. So
Yeah.
which I'm looking forward to getting into talking, because that is 100% book or I'm sorry, show original stuff. The whole thing, I mean, the whole thing with the Song and Ice and Fire and the misunderstanding, all of that completely invented for the show. But I think it really works for the show's versions of Rhaenyra and Alicent. I think it was a really necessary scene. It was not one that I was expecting that we needed, but I did really like it. I do think it was important. I think this week's episode was important, but I think all in all, I'll probably look back at the season and go, yeah, that was probably my least favorite episode, but it needed to be there. And there were some pretty important things that happened in this episode. And I think now at this point, the chess pieces are kind of all in the place. So I think I think we're ready. And I do understand. I have heard others express Darren's point of view, and I can understand where that would be coming from, especially if you haven't read the book. And I felt a little bit of that too, except that I kind of expected episode 3 to be this, kind of this just putting chess pieces in the place, since I know what's happening in episode 4, and I'm like, what is in between those things? What happens in between? So I kind of expected it. But yeah, I can understand like the frustration of like, when is this war going to start? It's like, come on. But I think I'm feeling confident at the end of it all that people, hopefully Darren and other people who feel that way, will be like, okay, this was all worth it. This was all worth. I can promise you it will not be John Cleese continuing to run up to for the whole entire season until we get to episode 8. It's not going to be that. It will not be that. And this episode also, including my namesake here, Alice Rivers, and at least one other character that if you didn't read the book, you're like, why? Who are these characters? And then you'll look back at the end of the season and go, oh, okay, I see why they introduced those characters. Like why? Same thing with Alan and Adam, who weren't in this episode, but were in the first 2. After you've seen the whole season, you'll be like, oh, That's why those characters were there. But in the first like 2 or 3 episodes, you're like, why are we spending any time with these characters I don't know?
Sure, you gotta drop off Chekhov's characters before they can show up at the end and do their thing.
One of the times, Mark, we talked about whether this character would even be in the show last week in our spoiler section, and he is now here.
Oh yeah, well, I think we knew he would be, but we just didn't know when.
We were thinking about he might be combined with another character. That was the question we were talking about.
I never thought that.
I did have a question. You brought it up, so let me just be sure, because that is something I wanted to clarify with the book readers. Is how much of this episode was in the book? I mean, how much was covered and how much is invented for the show? Because you're saying that whole last scene and the whole confusion of the prince that was promised bit is not in the original source material, let's say.
So, just what you got to remember about the book is it's written like a history book, so it only hits the major beats. So any of these, like most of these, like character stuff, wouldn't be in the books. I guess the Damon Harrenhal thing was slightly different, but basically the same.
It happens a lot earlier in the book. Like he's
it happened like before back in season 1.
He would have been back in season 1 if they followed the book exactly. So it happened a little bit differently, chronologically, but the way it happened was pretty similar.
He didn't want to spoil the little sewing scene.
Yeah.
The Battle of the Burning Mill is also from the book, but it was done a bit differently as well. And the Kristen Cole and his little mission, but as far as I remember, like Allison's brother was not there.
Okay.
Yeah, what I heard was Allison's brother was mentioned in one paragraph in the whole book.
Yeah.
It sounds about right, because I don't really remember that character.
Yeah, I don't remember him.
It was mentioned in like one paragraph in the book. So they're making him into a bigger thing.
Yes, so Red Shirt Hightower was Actually, I don't know what happened.
He might be a red shirt. I have no idea what's going to happen to this dude.
Because he wasn't in the book, really. But yeah, I would say. Also, the boys and the young boys and Rhaenyra going up to the Vale. I mean, Rhaena, not Rhaenyra. Sorry, Rhaena. That's her name, right? Right. Yeah, all the names are so damn similar. But Rhaena and Joffrey went to the Vale in the books.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Well, I had a feeling that was part of it, but I was curious with a couple of these scenes, just how they were constructed and how it felt things moving. I'm like, are they being sure that they have to hit some spots, or is this part of we're building the story points in between? So I was just kind of curious what they were working up with structure.
Yeah, but I would say other than those things, it was pretty much everything else was.
Brandon points out in the chat, the Bela chasing Kristen Cole was not in the book.
Yeah, that was show original. Yeah,
and also Brandon says Gwaine clashed with Daemon and the tourney. I think that was a different Hightower brother, but I could be mistaken. I know he fought one of the Otto's sons in the tourney, but I thought it might have been a different one.
Oh, I think I watched a YouTube video that said it was Gwaine, but I could be
was Gwaine. Okay, maybe
I think so. I might be remembering that wrong.
Maybe I do remember he fought one of Otto Hightower's sons in the tourney back in the very first episode.
As me and Alyssa were discussing last week in the book, Bella's dragon was too small to ride at this stage in the story, so the show changed it where she's riding a dragon,
which is great. More dragons.
Oh yeah, no. That was all great. I love that. Yeah,
it's great. More dragons. Let's do more.
Yeah. All right. Cool. So let's go ahead and jump into let's start with the titular title of the episode, the Battle of the Burning Mill. So I think this was an interesting scene because it's sort of as a metaphor for the whole show about, people exciting and using any excuse to fight each other, and how, but it's also more than that. It shows how the Targaryen rift, like the rift between these worlds, like ripples down and affects everyone. Now, granted, like these two houses, was it Bracken and Blackwood, hate each other and would find any excuse to sort of, but things have sort of gotten worse then at this moment. And then, yeah, they did kind of use the whole thing as an excuse. It's like as soon as the one kid said, "Oh, so your family sided with Aegon, huh? Of course you did." And it just as soon as they hear that, they use that as an excuse to like start a war, but it like or a little battle, and it just gets out of control. And it shows like the having that like I love the way they do this, by the way, because like I don't there's a lot of battles like this in the books where there's no main characters. And so I wonder like how the show is going to handle it, because they're obviously not going to have like a whole episode about some battle with no main characters. All right. So this is like a really interesting way to do it, of just like show the start and just hard cut the bodies lying all over the ground. I think that was actually really effective, and a really effective way to doing this. Darren, we'll start with you on this one.
The Hatfield and McCoys of Westeros here. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great classic scene. And you're right, it is kind of a perfect setup. It gets reflected back. It is showing how, some people really are committed to a cause, and some people are looking for any excuse to fight. This was also kind of cool because I think this was the first episode where I've noticed recognizing patterns in the opening sequence. I don't know if how much they're changing yet, but I was like, oh, that the field that we just saw in the opening with all the bodies around. Okay, that makes sense. And of course, we had the little kid with the little red line going across, which I thought was artful, So I'm kind of excited now that the opening, which I thought that we could use to tell parts of stories, I'm getting to see stories unfold. I'm excited. So again, just hailing the change in opener for the show. But yeah, I did like this scene. It was very nice. It was a great way to kind of jump in and get us kind of moving, which is why I think I was at least a little more excited with this episode, though then it felt a little bit of start and stop and start and stop. But I kind of like starting to see this, okay, stuff is starting to happen. Let's see where it goes. So, and you're right. I think that hard cut was a really nice way of, just showing. And later that day, it's all just taken out.
Now, the way they hard cut it was the one guy was like, "You wouldn't dare," and then the next scene is like him with a sword like sticking out of him, blood everywhere, and then it pans back and you see like a field of bodies just everywhere. I'm like, I guess he did dare. I guess he did. And I also appreciate that the show last season dropped that little scene. And with these two houses where there was the one, I can't remember which was, I think it was the Blackwoods was the kid who was trying to propose to Rhaenyra. It's when all those suitors were lining up to propose to young Rhaenyra. And
okay. Yeah.
And then the other one, I guess the Bracken. Yeah. Was like, you're just a little kid, making fun of him, and then they started fighting. And as Rhaenyra's like, I'm out of here, this is dumb. And you see in the background the little kid kills the older guy, the older kid. Those were the Brackens and the Blackwoods.
Okay, yeah. See, I totally did not even remember that at all. So thank you. That's kind of cool.
They talked about that at the time, as these are two houses that are always fighting. Whoever the Rhaenyra's advisor was, I forget who it was.
It was a Baratheon, because she was in Storm's End at the time.
Okay, yeah, it was. Was telling, giving her exposition of these two houses have been warring for a long time. So I'm glad that they did that, because when you read the book, there's in this house, and then every once in a while it's oh, the Manderleys. Oh yeah, I know them from Game of Thrones. But then there's all these other ones that are who the fuck are these people? So I appreciate that the show had already given us context for these two houses and did a little exposition last season, like, oh, they've been fighting each other for a long time. And there, I guess in the previous episode, they also, like, it was last week or I think it was last week's episode when they were sitting in the Green Council, there was somebody dropped a line about the Brackens or whatever. I love that they kind of set that up so you kind of get the context for it. And I agree, Mark. Like, I didn't need to see the Battle of the Burning Mill, and there's a lot of battles that are going to be like that. From the book, there's like they either have to put a main character in there so that they can show it, or just like yada yada past it because we want to see our characters that we know, not some like, and this is House Sir so-and-so and Sir Laughlin and Sir Macbeth and blah 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 blah, all these people that you don't know. Like you can't do that on the show. So I think they did a great job with that. And I do like that they called the episode that, even though it's this quick thing, because it is sort of like you've said, and I've heard other people talk about it, kind of an analogy for the Targaryens, where these two houses, you don't even know how the war started. We see Sir Strong or Lord Strong later on talking about that's lost in time. Nobody really knows. They've just been feuding for so long, like the Hatfields and McCoys, that no one knows how it started. And then Rhaenys has a line to that effect to Rhaenyra that. This is pretty soon. Like nobody's even gonna remember what started this. And she's like, right now we don't even know what really started this. So it's a really good analogy for the overall. Yes, Brandon, I just was throwing out names randomly. I don't know, blah 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 names, like random names of people. But yeah, so I do really appreciate that they kind of centered around this battle because it's a really good metaphor for the greater war that's coming.
Yeah, so I can't remember which house had the sort of yellow shield and which one was.
I think the yellow one was Bracken's because the black one was black. I think, pretty sure.
Okay, so because I remember the young suitor was the one in black and red, and the older kid that was like making fun of him was in the yellow.
So I think it was the Blackwood was the kid and the black. Yeah.
Would make sense for the Blackwood to wear black. That is.
Yeah.
That is true. All right, so also, I was going to say real quick that as soon as I saw the mill, I'm like, that mill's going to be burning soon.
Well, this is the name of the episode, too.
Well, it's before I saw the title of the episode. It's just from, I remember from the book. So next we get a scene with Eric and Arik's funeral. And this is pretty interesting because Jace is starting to become an angry young lad, and I think he has every reason to be because they just tried to execute his mother in a very dastardly way. And so it's interesting that because the first time I watched this, I didn't have the volume up that loud, and sometimes I speak soft, I didn't hear what they said, but so I watched it again and I realized that what he said is that Sir Arik is something like souling Eric's grave, like he doesn't deserve souling the grave by being there, but Rhaenyra just tries to be like, oh no, don't, that who's just doing his duty, you can't fault him for that. And he's like, well, what about the people who sent him? So it's sort of, and there's a lot of the going on this episode where people will just be ramping up for war again, getting into the theme. But what's really interesting is the conversation that Rhaenys and Rhaenyra have, where Rhaenys, I wrote down the quote from her because it's a really good quote. I think it was in the trailer. There is no war as hateful to the gods as a war between kin. So she's basically just warning against it and saying, and last season, she praised Rhaenyra for having a cool head, where Daemon and all these other people were like wanting to rush to war. So here she's trying to appeal to her, but Rhaenyra seems a bit sort of rejecting it a bit, saying like, they stole my throne, they're sitting in my throne, I can't really, Allison put her child and usurped me, so why should I try to make peace with her? But as we'll see later in the episode, Rhaenyra does come back to take Rainey's words to heart. So, but I thought this was a really sort of interesting scene. And Rainey's, of course, is always like the cool-headed, wise character. So, I thought this was a really cool scene. Alyssa, your thoughts on this scene?
Yeah, I do think most of her speech was in the trailer too. But
yeah,
but yeah, no, I thought this was a really cool scene for all those reasons. Again, the Eric and the Arik thing is just kind of a representative of the whole thing, and that's when Rainey says a line about a war against kin, and we have those two kin in being buried together. They killed each other, and I've heard other people use the metaphor for the Civil War, the American Civil War, and brother against brother, and that's very much what they are setting up for: brother against brother, cousin against cousin, all those things. And then the Targaryens, it could be brother and cousin and father all at the same time because they intermix a lot. But anyways, like it's a lot of that going on. So it was a really good speech, even though I did see most of it in the trailer. And Rhaenys is a really strong presence in Rhaenyra's court. That we'll get to the council scene later, where she also has a good line to the council people there that she I think is definitely helping to ground Rhaenyra, and leads her to decide to do what she does later in the episode. So yeah, pretty good stuff.
Sadly, I gotta say, Mark, I, like many Americans now, have the closed captioning on like all the time on my TV. Both getting older, and I think a lot of time I don't like.
I would have it on, but I can't figure out how to make it work on this TV.
So it does, but it does help.
It should be a setting on HBO Max. You could do that, but anyways.
Yeah, can be bothered.
yeah. We won't get into a whole discussion on sound mixing on shows these days, but so it is often helpful to be able to catch those little moments and things like that. So I was on top of what they were doing, and I mean, yeah, you're starting to see that little separation. Jace already saw his brother get killed, and now that his mom gets attacked, he's like, all right, so we're getting on it. And we have the theme of this episode of how much men are pushing towards war. And so later on, is it the two women that can possibly find the road to peace, which of course is what her niece is pushing during her big speech in this. So this is kind of a nice little setup episode, and it's also just starting to show the difference in the push and pull again, which we just sort of see later on, especially like when they're discussing the war and should Rhaenyra leave and maybe the rest of these guys should just take over the war for her and everything. It's just everybody is pitching and pulling, and we see that at least Rhaenyra here is still trying to navigate that conflict as clearly as possible without just, the blood rushing to her head and diving head in, which seems like really what everybody else is right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So after that, we go back to King's Landing, and we get the Green Council meeting after, and it's funny how Aegon is willing to declare this a huge victory when basically everyone just killed each other, while the other people in the council are like, I'm not so sure. What is also interesting though is like they start like bickering at each other. Like the Maester suggests the war plan, and the Lannister guy is like, "Oh, when did you become a master strategist?" And Allison has to point out, like, can we like try to get some decorum? So it's really showing what happens when Otto Hightower isn't there and how things get into a bit of chaos. But to be fair to Kristen Cole, who's very obviously not qualified for the job, he does come up with a pretty sound strategic plan because he is actually good at military strategy, as we'll see a bit more later on. So he comes up with a plan to go out and see this again. I need to put those closed captions on because I originally thought that he was saying they were going to go to the Riverlands and try to get the families there. But actually, when I went back and watched it again, he clearly says he's going to the Crownlands to get the houses that have already declared for Rhaenyra and pull them on their side, and then go to the Riverlands and take Harrenhal with them. So yeah, and if I don't know if you've seen the Westeros map, but the King's Landing's closer to the Crownlands, and then over the Riverlands, sort of in the middle of everything. But anyway, Aegon wants to go on his dragon. I mean, they wisely say, Aemon and Vhagar should stay there to protect King's Landing, which is a good strategy. But Aegon wants to go with his dragon, and everyone's like, no. But I think the main reason is not so much that they think he would suck or it would be a bad idea, but I think it has more to do with, well, you're the king. We can't risk. We can't. That's not how you play chess. You don't use your king to go and take all the pieces. So I think they're just being really protective of him, and I think that's wise. We'll get a bit later. We'll talk about Laird and his gambit, but anyway, So Darren, we'll start with you. Your thoughts on the Green Council?
They were definitely underlining the lack of experience that is now present in the Green Castle. The fact that they even follow Cole all the way up as, and then into the castle and finally sitting down is, and I'm running late, because of course he has to be running late. That's a necessary intro. But it gets everything already moving, which, is useful for the scene to play out. But the bickering, automatically falls out, because you're right. Without Otto there, as much as I dislike Otto, and I'm kind of glad that he is gone, he is the point of experience and thought. And while Kristen Cole might end up being a good general, that's still not the job of the Hand of the King. And that's a whole different thing. So it is interesting how I think they're kind of setting up sort of a splinter and a lack of real coordination over here on the green side, just because you're right. You've got everyone just kind of bickering on the small council. And I completely agree with Aegon. It's just, he's the young king. I want to go out. I want to kick butt. I've got my own knights now and everything. We could go as a big group. We'll hang out. We'll barbecue afterwards. Throw some beers back. It'll be great. And that's his kind of idea. But no, that is tactically extremely unsound, and will be something that will certainly take an advantage of, they feel. But then again, everybody also knows very little about what everybody else is doing. So it does make everything kind of look a little scramble-ish as well. So at least Kristen Cole has a plan coming out of that, which is easy to latch on. But it's like, again, I don't think anybody really knows what to do in a war like this. At least that's the feeling that I'm getting.
Yeah, Mark, you talked about last week how it seemed like Aegon just spontaneously named Kristen Cole as his Hand of the King because he was standing right there and he knew that it would really piss off Otto. And I see that this week because you don't really want your Hand of the King to be your general too. Like, I can understand, like, okay, Kristen Cole, you can be our war general or whatever, be in charge of the war movement, the war plans, blah blah blah. But who's going to be acting as Hand of the King while he's out running around? I mean, I think it would have made a little more sense maybe to have Aemon be the Hand of the King, if anyone, because he'll still be there. But regardless of which one of it is, it would still be the same chaos, I think. And you can see the frustration in Allison that, that's just completely just devolved into just bickering and chaos without Otto there. And I think you would have the same way regardless of who the Hand is. But now the Hand is going to be out running around, and who's going to be the Hand when they're doing the small council meetings. So I think everything is just completely going to shit. But also, it is interesting that Aemon just gets to be there now. I think it was in the first episode where Aemon comes in, like, what are you? Aemon's not on the small council. And Aegon's like, well, he's my brother when I'm here. And now that Otto's gone, he can just be there. He's not any particular master of coin or anything. He just gets to be there. And that's how when we're talking about changes from the book earlier, that's another change is that Aemon does go out with Vhagar with Kristen Cole in the book. And they said, no, let's keep him here. But I have a feeling, I think we see Vhagar flying around in the trailer. So I feel like he's going to have to get out there at some point in time. But for now, they're still trying to be a little bit more reserved, which is actually a good strategy. And definitely a good strategy it's like Commander Riker always telling Captain Picard the captain's place is on the bridge. You can't. The king's place is in the Red Keep. But again, like with Aemon and Vhagar, I have a feeling they're not going to be able to contain Aegon for forever either. That eventually something's going to give. But for now, at least, this is a wise strategy. Just kind of keeping your important pieces in place at King's Landing where you need them, and having Kristen Cole go out and do his thing. But yeah.
Cool. So then we go back to Dragonstone. We got a scene with Mysaria. This was really interesting, and this is again completely show original stuff here. I believe she was still in King's Landing in the books at this stage, but it's interesting that because it kind of hinted at last week's episode that she warned Rhaenyra about, or the guards, whatever, about Eric and Arik thing, and how she immediately was like, I just saved your life. It's like, oh, you expect a reward. I'm like, yeah, I think I deserve one. But it's, which she's not wrong. But it's really interesting, though, because last week she talked about how she didn't really want to be involved in anything and like just wanted to get away from everything. But now she's totally changed her mind and wants to join Team Black, which is something I also talked about last week, that I could tell she was really impressed with Rhaenyra, the fact that she still honored Daemon's word to let her go, even though she had nothing to go on except Mysaria's word. That's what Daemon said. And so that seemed to really impress her. And she said that someone's going to rule the realm. It's either going to be, the Hightowers, who are fuckwits, who don't give a shit about the little people, or you, and you actually seem pretty honorable. So yeah, I want you to be the one to do it. So that's really interesting. And that's probably a big sort of cap, feather in her cap, a nice little arsenal to have her around, seems, with her spy network and whatnot. But anyway, Alyssa, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Did this happen before the Black Council scene? Did we skip the Black Council scene, or does that come up later?
I have it in my notes before the Black Council scene.
Okay,
so I'm pretty sure it happened.
Probably right. My memory's all jumbled as far as which happened.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I trust you, and you have it in your notes. So yeah, I kind of agree with pretty much everything you said. That is interesting to see sort of that shift in Mysaria. So last week when she said, no, I don't want to have anything to do with with your games, like I just don't care about what you guys are doing. And then so at first I was wondering, I was like, was she lying? Was she being deceptive there? But the more I think about it, the more I think that you're right, is that she really did see something in Rhaenyra that really started her thinking that Rhaenyra was pretty honorable. And you see that in this scene this week. And I like you said in the book, she is in King's Landing. I like that they're bringing her in now, and that because I'm really interested to see how this dynamic is going to go between these two characters. Because Myceria, I saw a video that did a lot of comparisons between her and Varys, even though Laris is the one who has the name that rhymes with Varys, and that Varys was for the small folk. There's the scene in the first season right before Ned Stark gets killed, where Ned Stark goes, "Who do you serve?" And he says, "The realm, my lord." So he was someone who came from poverty, who somehow was able to get as high as he was into the small council, but it was very much in touch with the small folk, which is the same with Myceria. And yet, like Varys, I don't know how trustworthy she is. That she also little shady too, could be a little bit of a dark influence on Rhaenyra potentially. So I'm really, really, really interested to see this dynamic moving forward. So I'm really glad that this character is here.
Yeah, I'm glad that we had this little scene, merely in the fact is last week's episode, it did look like she was going to go and warn them about seeing Eric or Arik or whichever one that she saw coming up. And yet the way that the scene played out, it seemed more like Eric caught wind of Arik and followed him up. So I didn't make the connection that she actually went back and told anyone.
Well, so I think it was implied because right after she saw Arik, she said to the guards escorting her, she's like, "A moment." So
sure,
I think
no, exactly. Yeah. And that's why I was like, oh, we're going to get the warning. And yet the way that they played the scene out, it seemed to be more along the lines of like, wait, was that my brother? It seemed like more of a discovery without being told. So in that sense, I appreciated this scene because at least did let me know like, oh, okay. So there was that kind of complete, and maybe I just need to rewatch that episode and, recatch that. And I did like the idea that we're obviously starting to see some, powerful women connecting and leading forward. I think that's kind of a good side bit with this story is kind of like the women have a different viewpoint of the men who are always pushing for war. So maybe we can have a little bit more of a thoughtful look at things, just different approaches. So it totally makes sense to me that the two of these kind of connecting. I thought that, yeah, it was a little stumbly with the whole like, oh, so I should reward you for saving my life? Like, well, yeah. I mean, gracefully it'd be kind of an offer. So I kind of like that. And the idea that, yeah, I didn't want to get involved, but you were willing to do something you didn't have to. So I was willing to make a move back. I thought that was something worth saving. And now we seem to be intertwined. So this seems to be a connection that we're going into. So to me, it just seemed like a very natural kind of syncing up of characters. So I'm excited to see where we go forward. And of course, obviously, by the end of the episode, we get an immediate use of that knowledge right there.
So this kind of an aside a little bit, but Alyssa, you mentioned Varys and how he's for the small folk. So this past week, I went to Game of Thrones House of the Dragon themed trivia night. I missed the first round. I still came in second place. But anyway, one of the questions they had was a who said it, and the quote was something along the lines of, "It's no easy task for someone not of royal blood to be a self-made man," and it showed like who everyone's guessing, and I was the only one that guessed Varys, and everyone else guessed Littlefinger. I was like, oh, I must be wrong, but in fact, it was Varys. I was the only one who was right. But anyway,
nice.
So there's something else I want to talk about in this scene, which might slightly bump against spoilers. But we'll try to be vague about it. But if anyone's very sensitive, they can tune out for a second. We see sea smoke, right? This is the name of the dragon, flying around and freaking out, and Rhaenyra mentions, oh, he's been very active and crazy and hectic as of late. So there's a theory going around that Laenor had died like because we saw him going off to Essos, and that was totally different from the books. Again, this is just conjecture. So do we think that's what happened, that Laner actually died and Sea Smoke is sensing that? Or because in the books, and everyone keeps bringing this up, that a dragon can't get a new rider if the writer's still alive, so that's why they're guessing that Laenor died. Or I think maybe the show's just changing that rule, and Sea Smoke is just going crazy because he hasn't had a writer in a while.
Well, I didn't. Masseria mentioned like maybe he's lonely, or maybe she's lonely. So I thought that it was like looking for a dragon mate. I didn't even think about riders or anything about that. So that was the only conclusion that I got.
Yeah, I don't think that they go too much into dragon mating in the source.
Yeah.
Well, a rider would make more sense in that sense. Like,
they always talk about like the connection between the Targaryen and but they do have to mate. They certainly don't shy away from human mating in these stories. So, but I think the dragon mating, I'm just now realizing it now that you brought it up. It seems to be behind the scenes, and we don't see how that happens. But yeah, I think that it would make a lot of sense that Sea Smoke is just craving a writer. I don't think that. I mean, yeah, was it really a hard and fast rule that they have to be dead and before he gets another writer? Or is that just one of those things that?
Well, all these YouTube people are talking like it is, but I don't even remember that.
Well, because I saw one YouTube video that said that Sea Smoke is probably just really lonely for a writer and needs another writer now. So I don't know. I would lean more towards that. I don't know if we're gonna get any definitive conclusion on Laenor's fate. I thought it was interesting that they kept him alive last year. And the only reason I can think that they did that is because they didn't want it to be implied that Rhaenyra actually did kill him.
Yeah. She's nicer in the show than she
was. She's nicer in the show. So they didn't want it to be implied that she could have killed him. So they just let him be alive. But I don't know if they had any plan for that character one way or the other. I heard all these rumors that, at the end of last season, or theories, I should say, not rumors, that, Laenor's going to come back and he's going to do this thing and that thing, take the place of this book character and do this other thing. And I think we're just never going to hear about that character again. Like, I think we'll never really know if he died or not. And if someone else were to happen to ride Sea Smoke and we don't get a definitive conclusion on Laenor, then we might get all these nerds going, well, he can't do that because he's still alive. It's like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't care. I think Laenor being alive or not is just irrelevant at this point. I don't think we're ever going to hear about it. The implication that I got is that Sea Smoke is just really wanting a writer. Like he's lonely for having that human connection.
I completely agree. I don't think Laenor's ever going to appear, ever be mentioned. But I'm sure if Cisa gets another writer, there might be fans will be like, "Oh, that means he's dead." And I'm like, whatever. I don't really care.
Well, I know that the Targaryens have a strong connection with their dragons, but the show has never really underlined a strong magical thing or some sort of psychic bond. Whether it can be felt over miles and things like that. I don't know. I know the book's a little different, but the show manifestations at the very least have very much shied away from that type of stuff. So, how would the dragon know whether they're alive or dead outside of just not seeing them for a long time and then being lonely and frustrated, making assumptions unless they happen to die right in front of them? So, I mean, that's the only thing, whether confirming live or dead. I haven't seen anything in this show that really tells me like some type of higher level psychic connection between.
Well, it was definitely implied in the Game of Thrones show with Daenerys and her dragons that they had this psychic connection.
Okay. Well, I guess it's been a while where I've burned.
Yeah.
It made me burn so much of that from my brain. But where would Lenore be if? Where was he? It would be in the.
He
in
was
King's
going to
Landing?
Essos, I believe. He was going to the
Oh.
Free Cities.
The Free Cities. Okay, all right. I was going to say because if they could have in some sort of escape, and that's where the dragon leads them, but I don't see why they would head to Essos for any reason at this point. So
I don't expect to see.
Yeah.
I
mean,
think
that would be the only
theories
reason.
about him coming back and being a different character. I don't think any of that's going to happen.
Yeah. So it's either going to be the dragon's going to lead them to the character for some reason, or it's just like, well, we need a new writer, and this new person will be our new dragon writer. You know.
So Alex in the chat is saying they definitely implied last season that Damon and his dragon had a psychic connection during the battle last season. I mean, I think it was slightly implied. I don't think it was implicitly stated, but I think one could make that conclusion.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, a strong connection. I don't recall anything being like knowing knowledge over vast distances. But again, perhaps I am misremembering.
I mean, according to the books, they would, like, a dragon would know psychically if their rider died, I believe. But I don't think that's it. But anyway, so let's see, where are we at now? So I'm kind of smushing these scenes together. We get Rhaenyra meets with Sabrina and tells her to go to the Vale take Joffrey and the two young boys. She also said, did she also say right to the magistrate of Pentos? I was a bit confused.
I was a bit confused by that too. She said right to, so I know she's talking about the dude that Damon and Lena and the kids were staying with in Pentos last season. Where actually is where they were staying when Lena was killed or when she died. So I know that's who they're talking about. But she says, I want Joffrey to be fostered with Lady Jane, and I want the two younger kids to go there to two, and I want you to go with the three kids. But then write to the guy from Pentos to see if he'll take the two younger kids because it'll be safer for them there. And then she wants Raina to go there. I was really confused. Like,
that's the impression I got too. Like they were going to go to the Vale first. Yeah,
right to that dude, and then maybe after that you'll go to Pentos. I mean, that's I don't know. That's how I read it, but it was a little confusing.
You got to spread your kids out to make sure they can't be all assassinated at the same time. So you got to send some people over here, and some people over here, and some people over here.
But it sounds like initially all three of them are going to the Vale.
Yeah, I think they were all going, and then
all four of them are going to the Vale.
And then it sounded like, and see if this person will take you too, because I think they just want to kind of spread people out. Like, this is a safe place, but this will be safer for you because I need you to keep track of these magical eggs. You know, these great treasures for us, because if everything else falls, this has to be the backup. So I think that's like the backup to the backup plan.
So, okay. So they're going to go to the Vale first and then go to Pentos.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, they're going to write the guy first. And
they're going to write the guy. Yeah, but she's still going to go to the Vale first.
Yeah, they're all going to the Vale, and I think they're going to write the guy once they're at the Vale. And
so
then
they're going to... Joffrey and the dragon would stay in the Vale, and Raina would just take the two younger?
Yes.
Okay.
And she would be the mother to them. And that's, he would be there. So they're spreading everybody out.
And then one of the eggs is going to get left behind, and she's going to take the other three to Pentos with her, and then Dany's going to get them 100 years later. I don't know.
Well, you know what? I read something saying the director of the episode confirmed those were Daenerys' eggs.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
confirmed that those are Daenerys' eggs.
That's just what I've read. That could be bullshit, but I read that the directors.
So one of the eggs is going to be left in the Vale or something, and then the other 3 will become Dany's eggs in 100 years.
Yeah. So was my understanding like one of those eggs was the young Viserys's egg?
Oh yeah, I think right. Yes. And what about the younger Aegon? Does he already have a dragon at this point, or what's the
I
deal?
think that I think they were saying he has a tiny dragon. They saved their CGI budget, but both him and Joff, because they mentioned the names, I can't remember the names, but they said, "Oh, these 2 tiny dragons are going to go with you as well." So
Right.
I believe
They're just too young to ride.
Yeah, Aegon the Younger's dragon and Joffrey's dragon. And it's funny because Lady Jane in the Vale, said that she wanted a dragon, in exchange for getting fighting men down. So, okay, we'll send you a 6-year-old and this tiny, tiny little dragon.
Because
you didn't specify how old the dragon was.
It's because in the book he's older and the dragon is older, so it makes sense to go guard the Vale because he actually is a little bit older and the dragon is older. But here it's like, here's a 6-year-old and this tiny dragon. Like, I'd be pissed if I was Lady Jane, and maybe she will be. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
And sorry, just real quick. In the chat, Alex mentions it's a dumb retcon given the fact that Cyrax doesn't look like Dany's dragons, while Dreamfire does look like Dany's dragons. I think that's a fair point, but also I just think, why confirm that now? You lose any potential for storytelling you have because people are just going to guess, oh, and those get away, versus actually feeling any danger that they might get caught or moved or anything.
Which one? Sorry, which one is Dreamfire again?
I cannot remember. I can't remember all of the dragons and nor what they all look like. I'm just
Dreamfire was Helena's dragon.
Oh,
is that
right?
I don't
know. I just think again that would allow different storytelling to go. Oh, it's not actually these; it's another set of eggs that become or whatever. I don't know. To me, it's just from a storytelling standpoint, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot, giving it away.
So were those eggs shown to be Cyrax's eggs? I thought they were because those are the eggs Daemon found at the end of last season. Were they? I thought they were Vermithor's egg. Maybe I don't know. I don't know.
Honestly, I don't want to get too tied up in the dragon's eggs and whose dragons. I honestly
begin arguing about whose dragon is whose.
Yeah, I don't get caught up in this much detail about whose dragon is that and what dragon is that. It's just like I don't
Fair
really.
Enough. Yeah.
If that's a retcon, that is one that I just could not possibly care less about.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be a bit silly if they're like, "Oh, those are Dany's eggs," but whatever. That's it's like has to have an origin story. That's where they came from. But anyway, that's how they
prequel. You gotta have a prequel that sets up the.
True. True. But anyway, Rhaena is not very happy about this, and she's like kind of pissed off. And when they send her off, her sister, I think, is generally like trying to be nice and like, you doing an important mission. She feels like she's being humored. You're just treating me this way because I don't have a dragon, and she's obviously jealous of Bella that she gets to stay behind. It's like, oh, it's only because she has a dragon, isn't it? But it's like. Other people, I think Bella's more like you're gonna be safe, so you shouldn't be so upset over this, and you still have an important job to do. And I think Rhaenyra is actually not sort of looking down on her because she even said like, "Look, if something happens to us and our house falls, it's going to be up to you." So I think it's a wise thing for her to do as well.
Yeah, but also she doesn't have a dragon because if she did, fighting, being stayed there to fight in the war. I mean, let's be real, she's not wrong. But also, she is serving an important purpose. I don't think Rhaenyra means to just dismiss her or, to look down on her or anything. But I can certainly see why she would take it that way.
Yeah, well, again, nobody wants to be pushed aside, but it is exactly that bit. It's this is your duty as this person. You're the youngest. You can't fight right now. We got to keep someone away in case the rest of us die. You're the backup plan. It's just, it's a smart thing because that also kind of implies that we're going to see some just carnage going on where suddenly there's a girl back there going, actually, it's really nice up here. It's quiet. I don't get bothered at all. Got a lute player. It's everything that you need.
Right. I do don't want to get into spoilers, but I'm thinking in my head of possible ways that this show could go different than the books, but we'll see. We'll see about this. But anyway, so let's go over to Harrenhal where we see Damon show up. And we'll get
So
more
we are skipping the Black Council scene?
No, the Black Council scene's after Harrenhal.
What were you combining? You said you were combining the Rhaena scene.
So I was combining the Rhaena talking to Rhaenyra. So Rhaena going off to the Vale is after the Black Council scene, but I was
okay, so you were kind of mushing that all together.
Yeah.
All right, so now we go off to Damon in the Haunted Castle. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then the Black Council scene's after this. All right, so and we'll get to Damon's vision stuff later on. I just want to focus more on this opening scene where he shows up there, and you can hear people running away. It's dragon, run away when he first shows up, but when he goes down, it's no one's around. It's where the hell is everybody? I thought this was a very effective eerie scene. It was very creepy, and it does show the sort of feel that Harrenhal usually has whenever you see it, and it's really fun in going through the castle and had that sort of haunted house type feel to it that I think was actually really good. And then when finally he shows up in the dining hall and he's like, "I've come to take the castle," it's yeah, of course you have. It's and the guy is yeah, of course you have. You're welcome. Whatever, come over. It's yours. And Damon at first doesn't trust it. It's you expect me to eat this food? Where you're gonna poison me? It's poison. What the hell are you even talking about? Why would he poison you? And it's interesting because he was oh, well, you're not going to tell me that you're not loyal to, your liege Lord Larys Strong, who is deeply embedded with the Greens. And it's no, fuck that guy. he killed my brother and my nephew. So exactly. Simon Strong, I believe this guy's name is.
It's actually his nephew and his grandnephew, because Lionel Strong is his nephew.
See, I've heard this different ways. One of the YouTube video I watched said that Lionel was his brother. Another one I watched said it was his nephew. So I was a bit confused.
No, it's his nephew. I mean, clearly he's white-haired. Lionel is younger, so he's an older guy. He's Lionel's.
Okay, all right. So no, that one video I watched must have gotten.
But I saw other videos. All the other videos that I saw said.
Okay, all right, fair enough. It's because that's what I thought at first. That's what I said in my video because that's what I thought at first. But anyway. Whatever, they're related. but yeah, no, that's interesting that he's just yeah, no, screw that guy, we're all here to help you. And Damon's okay, we're gonna, and Simon brought up the thing about the Brackens and the Blackwoods, how they were constantly fused. So he paints a picture of the Riverlands being completely in chaos, and Damon's well, go to, the Tullys, they're the liege lords, right? And so we'll just get them. And he's well, Tully's actually, no one really listens to them. And he's, Damon's well, no, you should listen to your liege lord, which is kind of rich coming from him. But anyway, so it seems he's well, we're gonna get everyone in the Riverlands together and take King's Landing. So it seems he's being a bit ambitious. And the Simon guy's okay, yeah, whatever. So it was pretty
Your
interesting.
Grace.
Oh yeah,
underlines everything with Damon in this scene.
So would he technically be referred to as Your Grace by being the king consort? I suppose technically is this time.
Names are called Your Grace.
Okay.
Like Alicent was your grace when she was Viserys's.
Oh yeah, no, true.
I wouldn't
No,
think so.
because Queen Elizabeth's, or didn't we have her person to hang out with was the prince? If it's a consort, if it's not, unless they're in the ruling party, that's the king and the queen. But the consort, I don't think is technically has royal authority in that same sense. But I am not an expert in.
Well, they still call Alicent your grace, even though she's the Dowager Queen now. So I don't know. It seems to me
because she was queen.
Yeah,
but again, I don't know exactly how all these.
Isn't that the same equivalent? Because he's basically, married to the ruler.
Not all marriages end up have that transfer of power inclusive in it. I've seen it in through history, and I don't get the rules of when it is and when it's not. I just know there are demonstrations, and the fact that our Lord of Harrenhal here believed that it was the other way around. I think this is just to underline the fact that, yeah, Daemon says that Rhaenyra is queen, but that was also the problem with last week, is he also kind of think that he should be in charge too. So I think he's grasping for that title as opposed to it technically being his.
Yeah, I did get that vibe from this scene.
Yeah. But I mean, otherwise, personally, with this scene, this is great. Actually, I think everybody's dead and nobody exists in this, and it's just Daemon imagining everyone being surrounded by ghosts. I think is really the whole thing here. No, this was kind of weird because Harrenhal, the last time I really remember, of course, was post-dragon melting, and it was all falling apart and everything like this, 200 years from now. And now when he shows up and he's like, I'm here at Harrenhal and the place is a wreck, I'm like, why are you here? Is there anyone here? This looks like this is a half demolished castle. What is the point of it? So, I mean, I guess it's just a large half demolished castle so it can house everybody. But yeah, it was really weird going into this. I was definitely wondering, like, what is he even doing here? What is the point? And why is he sneaking around with a sword, kind of freaking out? So it took a little bit for me to kind of catch up with what was going on. And it definitely sets up for what we have later, the fact that this is just a creepy place. But in my mind, it's like, yeah, but Harrenhal's always been a creepy place.
Well, I thought it was strategically located, was my understanding.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
It's a good place to build up.
And it can house a whole bunch of armies and stuff because it's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once the wall is fixed.
Yeah. It's strategically placed. It's a in the book they make it more clear, Harrenhal is an important thing that don't both want, which Kristen Cole needs to get Harrenhal too, but
yeah,
to
be fair, they have been talking about it all season, both sides.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that it is a strategic importance.
Sorry, I just want to jump in real quick in the chat where Brandon's saying that they've merged Elmo Tully and Kermit Tully. No, say it ain't so. They can't cut out Kermit and Elmo.
Into Oscar Tully.
Into Oscar, yeah.
Yeah, and Grover Tully is the current lord that they mentioned.
Yeah.
Was old. You're muted, Darren. I don't know if you're trying to talk. But...
Thank you. No, I was going to say, Brandon, yes, I was referring to Prince Philip. Thank you for the correction there.
Yeah.
Oh, and he's so grumpy. Oscar, you're a grouse. That's because I live in a goddamn trash
can. Yeah, but back to the Daemon getting into Harrenhal thing. I did really enjoy this scene a lot. how Lord Strong there was just like, yes, 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 of course you're going to take over, yes. And he's like, well, why aren't you going to serve Laris? And he's like, well, do you find it strange that a fire started in this dampity place? There hasn't been a fire since the dragon burned this this all 100 years ago. Yeah, no, fuck that guy. That I really enjoyed the scene. And did anyone else notice? Am I the only one that notices that Damon does a Leslie Nielsen at the end of this scene, where he was like, "So the throne, what is it? It's a big chair with a bunch
Oh,
of."
Yes.
It's not important right now. And I'm like, he just did a Leslie Nielsen.
He wants to be in the remake of The Naked Gun. Okay, this is he's laying out his pre-audition here. Yeah.
well, isn't that more of an airplane thing than a naked
It was
gun?
an airplane thing.
Yeah.
It was Leslie Nielsen's line that he did it a couple times in Airplane. Like, a hospital? What is it? It's a big building with a bunch of patients in it. But that's I mean, it wasn't exactly that. What the exact line was, a throne, yeah, a big chair with a bunch of swords. I immediately thought of Airplane when he did that line. But that was just like the topping on that scene for me, because I thought it was a I really liked that actor that they hired for Lord Simon Strong there. There was a good little bit of lightheartedness in this episode, so I really liked it.
Yeah, I mean, lightheartedness in a very creepy place.
Very creepy place. Like right after he's walking through the creepy castle. Someone earlier was saying that it reminded them. Oh, it was Alex said it reminded them Dark Souls game. I don't know any video games past like 1993, so to me, I'm thinking Castlevania. Like that's where because that's where my video game knowledge ends. So I was very much thinking Castlevania. But yeah, creepy castle, haunted castle vibes for sure.
All right, so now get to the Black Council.
I don't remember what it was I wanted to say about the Black Council. Because
so just the first one. We'll get to the other one later on. But this is the one where the counselors, whatever, the guys on Rhaenyra's councils, kind of being dicks. They're like, oh, well, maybe you should go off someplace safe because it's too dangerous for you here, and don't worry about the war, we'll take over. And I love how she like immediately cuts them down. And I was like, yeah, I hope you're not like suggesting that you take over the war for me, because that's treason. It's a good thing you guys stop there. So that makes me a bit iffy on these guys, but I guess it goes to show the attitude that even though they support her, they still have this attitude of, oh, you're just a woman, war is man's domain or whatever. And I think part of the reason why they had that attitude is because they're so frustrated because they want to go fuck shit up, and she's like trying to hold them back. There's also we get another great Rhaenys moment where after Rhaenyra leaves, she's just like, she wears the crown of Jaehaerys, who ruled of more than 60 years, and you all would, you do well to remember that. So that's sort of they're laying down a law and like being stern. It's like, yes, we're women, but we can still be stern. We're just not idiot hotheads, and you should just listen to us. So yeah. Anyway, Alyssa, your thoughts on this?
I have nothing to say. No, I'm kidding. No. The Black Council, I wish we had more known characters on there. Hopefully they'll either bring in more characters we know or develop one or two of these dudes, because right now it's just a bunch of old white dudes. I don't know who their names are, like, really. Was Jace there? I can't remember. Jace is a part of it in the book, but I can't. Was he present?
Yeah, Jace was there. He just didn't say much.
Jace should kind of, step up a little bit. Because right now I'm really enthralled with the Green Council scenes. I think we know these characters a lot more. We got a Lannister there who we've seen since last season. Yeah, and the Maester has been there for a little bit. He wasn't the original Maester, but he's the Maester under Aegon. So I'm really much more interested in the Green Council scenes right now, and I want to be interested in the Black Council scenes. But right now, it's just a bunch of old white men that I don't know who they are, who are all, and they all kind of just blend together. In my mind, they were all like, yeah, why don't you just go ahead and be somewhere safe, and we'll take care of, leave this war business to the men. And you poor little woman, just go off into your, and I loved her response, like, I hope you were kidding, because that's treason. And Rhaenys says she was really reluctant at first with Rhaenyra, but I think she is shown herself to be really Rhaenyra's strongest advocate, and also one of her most reliable advisors, as we talked about earlier. So I love that scene, how Rhaenys steps in after she leaves. But what I'm hoping for moving forward is maybe bring Corlys in or somebody. I don't know, bring some people in that we know a little bit more, to make these scenes a little bit more as interesting as the Green Council. But I did appreciate Rhaenyra's response, and Rhaenys stepping in there. I think are the key moments of this scene.
Yeah, I mean, definitely all that. I think what we're also seeing, to me, kind of an underline between the juxtaposition for this and the Green Council scene is the preparation of leadership. Rhaenyra obviously has been trained to a certain extent and what to expect and how to view things, and she has put herself in the position to want to learn these things. And how does the council work, and who advises, and what everything is. So as she comes into this position of leadership, she's actually able to lead the council. So when the people are all bickering, she can put them in their place and know exactly who to ask and how to listen and who to direct in that sense. When we look back at Aegon, of course, he has been completely unprepared. And obviously, Otto couldn't really be inviting Aegon to the council meetings and having long discussions with him if Rhaenyra is supposed to be king, and and that line is all established. Even though that was Hightower's plan, I think the big fault is obviously he expected to be there to then take over that position of guiding the young king at that point. But I think we established very early on, it was already too late. The king's already fumbling when he's talking to the people. He hasn't been prepared for that. Then, of course, between of egos, he gets rid of Otto. The Green Council is kind of a mess. Whereas at the very least, while there's differences of opinion here on the Black Council, it is being led properly. And I just think that's kind of an interesting difference to see between the two and how things are going to play out. The only thing that I really wish that I saw more is I wish they gave us those cool overhead looks of the table so we could see where the armies were in position, because they were talking about this and possibly the later scene of where everybody is and who's moving where and stuff. And we never really get to see that overhead. And you got such that cool table specifically to see these things. And I'm like, it would just help me as an audience, as a viewer, to just kind of know what you guys are talking about. Because when you're saying it's like, oh yeah, we've got 3 of the river lands and here coming over from the crown lands, and if we're up here from the Vale, then we'll bring those down. I'm like, I can't picture all that in my head as readily. Just again, a thing that I wish that they had shown, but they didn't. That would be my only kind of criticism. But I do like the comparatives between styles and preparation between each of the 2 councils.
And there was another interesting thing. I believe it was this scene that I forgot to mention, that Rhaenyra immediately deduced that Otto was gone. She's like, Otto would have never done this bullshit with sending the twin brothers.
It was Rhaenys who said that, and
was it? Oh, yeah. Okay.
comparing the two Erics, she had a line where she was like, "Yeah, Otto definitely didn't send. Otto would never send Eric to kill."
Okay. Yeah, I think they did mention at the council that Rhaenyra believed that Otto wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they brought it up again there too, but initially Rainey's first brings it up that the Eric thing couldn't have been Otto's handiwork at all. And I think they reemphasize it like, yeah, I don't think Otto's there anymore.
That's really interesting that they can tell that that they don't have good leadership because of the dumbass thing. But to be fair, and Otto referred to it as a prank, but to be fair, it almost worked.
But but you know would have worked if he didn't like halfway through the room pull a sword and go sneak attack, and instead just walked up to her and then stabbed her, not giving his brother time to show up. I mean, I'm happy to tear that scene apart a little bit, but
I think that that would be dishonorable to do. And I think Arik is an honorable guy. I think he had problems with the mission as is, and he didn't want to make it any worse. That's my headcanon.
Sure. Also apparently likes failure. But, that's fine.
That's fine. Brother, she didn't expect anyone to show up at the last second. He didn't know Massaria warned them. But anyway. He's like, let me walk very slowly. But here was my thing. My bigger issue is when Eric came crushing in and going, brother, he could have just went killed Rhaenyra. Okay.
The other thing, it's like, let me pause, and then we will again, not to dive into last week's episode, but yeah, those were the problems that I have. It's kind of like, look, you had like 3 opportunities to just kill the queen, and instead you needed to face off for the drama. Just structure the scene differently, and that doesn't have to be a problem.
I still love that scene now. I don't care what anyone says. But anyway, so we get a brief scene with Corlys and Rhaenys talking. When is that ship going to ever be ready? Every episode they're hanging on a ship that's still being worked on.
These time, Mark. These at least 3 episodes.
Look, in the preview for next week's episode, they're like, it's been weeks since my husband has died. And I'm like, really? It's only been a couple of weeks. You guys are getting a lot of stuff done and nothing done at the same time. So they're just playing with time that way.
Yeah, well, still way better than what Game of Thrones did with travel times. But anyway, so we get a brief scene between Rhaenys and Corlys, which is kind of interesting as they're talking about who's going to be the heir to the Driftmark. I believe he wanted Joffrey, and she's like, no, it should be Rhaena. And then this is, again, having to rethink having Rhaenyra as queen is making them reconsider. Maybe we can have a woman as their lord, but he doesn't like either option because none of them, knows anything about how to operate ships. I'm like, but they're kids, god damn it, Corlys. You gotta teach them. But anyway,
should have been dunking those babes in the salt water from the beginning.
But I think that that is sort of showing that power couple there and how they, they're still, even though they disagree, they're still sort of have this attitude of we can take on the world together. So I thought that was a nice little scene. I don't know if you guys had anything to say about that.
No, not really. This was one of those where I was like, this is interesting, and I'm sure it's giving us information, but okay, we're seeing a lot of this discussion, like, where do we put this? But we love each other, but these things are going to happen. And then we go to another group and they say the same thing. And yeah, I think this was the part in the episode where I was starting to go, all right, man, let's go.
I think it is something that should be touched on, though, because they made such a big deal about Luke being the heir to Driftmark, and now that he's dead, I think they should at least, like, this, because now they don't have an heir, and at least sort of discuss who that might be.
Oh, no. That's what I'm saying is none of these scenes are frustrating in the sense that I don't think that they're entirely useless or they're poorly done or they don't make sense in a way. It's just that it seems like we get a lot of these things or have been. Just at this point, I was kind of like, all right, we're going to have another discussion of, okay, war's coming. What are we going to do and where are we going to put things? And where are we going to put people? And yeah, as I said, it's not anything against this scene or the actors. I like seeing them. I like their interactions. I think just from a pacing standpoint, this was where my frustrations were starting to come
Well,
in.
no, I totally agree. Because build the damn ship already. But anyway.
Did I also mention that didn't Corliss say he's like feeling a lot better now or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, he's taking a long time to heal. But yeah, I felt a slight bit of frustration too. It's like, but I also kind of understand the pacing, like knowing how they're kind of pacing out the season. Like I understand it. I think it was good to show Corliss, so remember he's there. Which is all we've really gotten of him this season. It's like, oh yeah, hey, remember me? I'm a thing. I'm here.
And they're hanging out by the ship that's being built.
Don't forget me.
Yeah, he's never at the Black Council. He's always hanging out by the ship.
Yeah, I don't think he's a part of the Black Council.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. He should be. They should to make it more interesting. But yeah, I think that I think we're gonna see more of Corliss like doing things, like playing more of a role, hopefully later in this season. Right now, it has just been kind of like, "Hey, I'm Corliss. I'm still here." But you're also right; it is worth talking about. It's not a completely worthless scene. I do agree with you on that. But I'm ready for let's get moving. Let's get it moving.
Yeah, I think what topped this scene off for me while I was watching is they were having the interaction. There was a pause, and then I was like, looked at my wife, and I'm like, well, I gotta go now. And right after that, Corliss is like, I have things I must attend to. And I'm like, okay, well, obviously it's the end of scene there, and he has to leave. You could just end this scene right there in the middle of the discussion, but it's like, uncomfortable silence. Well, I have to go now. And the next scene, I will be running late. This is how we get scenes going.
Well, no, I think they do it for a reason. They do it to show
it's totally structured, but again, if I'm starting to focus on what the script structure is, then you're starting to lose me. So yeah, it's.
Well, I think they did it to show that the awkward silence between the two of them and how he has to end the conversation by saying, "I must go now." So I think that was a creative decision, but overall, I do agree that I was feeling kind of during this scene as well, but it's a brief scene, so it's not too bad. Anyway, so then we go back to good old Laris, where because Aegon is hanging out with his drinking buddies who he promoted to the King's Guard for some damn reason. Just again, what an awful king. I mean, he's not as bad as Joffrey, but I don't know. He's not as cruel as Joffrey, but maybe
he's very incompetent. Maybe not
very incompetent. Yes. But anyway, so he's getting his, Aegon the Conqueror's armor on, which is apparently way too big for him, but he doesn't care. And he's like, I'm getting ready to go off and ride my dragon in the battle, even though they already freaking told him not to. So Laris, pretty clever guy, I think, because he uses this sort of, I don't know if you'd call it reverse psychology, but sort of this trickery thing. Oh, do you know they're saying about you? They're saying that the council is trying to trick you into going out so they can rule the kingdom in your absence. And if he, of course, falls for it, he's like, oh, well, I can't have that. I'm definitely going to stay behind. But then on top of that, he promotes Laris to Master of Whisperers. And apparently, because I had thought he was one all along, but he's never at the actual small council meeting, so that actually makes sense why he wouldn't be there, because he's not. I can't remember what the hell they called him before, but apparently they didn't have a Master of Whisperers because that's not something King Viserys ever wanted, because he's incompetent. But anyway, now there is one, so now I do wonder if we will see Laris at the small council meeting, because now he's officially the Master of Whispers.
I had mentioned it in a previous week that in the book, Laris is the Master of Whisperers, and he's at the small council meeting. So I was like, oh, he's not here. He's just kind of lurking around. So I guess I assumed they were just going to keep it that way. That because they had already, but at this point, he's already Master of Whisperers and is already at the council meeting. So I just assumed that that's how they were going to do it in the show. But they decided eventually, okay, now you're Master of Whisperers. So now I would expect that, because it makes more sense for him to have a title than just to be some guy that's lurking around. And why would King Aegon listen to him? Like, he's just some dude.
I think he had a title. I can't remember what they called him, but he had a function.
What his title was. He's just some lurky dude.
Well, he did have a function. He wasn't just some creepy guy lurking around.
Well, he's the Lord of Harrenhal, isn't he? Isn't it that?
Yeah.
Harrenhal,
Sure.
but he's not at Harrenhal. He's in the.
But he had a function
his
at
role in
King's
the
Landing,
castle?
but I can't remember.
He's
what
the
it was.
journeyman of hushed voices, then promoted to the Master of Whispers. See, it's a graduated thing.
I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, now officially he is the Master of Whisperers, which I thought he just should have been all along. But man, Laris must love Aegon being king because he's so easy for him to manipulate. Like, it's just so easy for Laris. Like, Laris can just get this guy to do whatever he wants him to do, really. Yeah, we'll see how long Laris can hold him back once the war starts to get going. I have a feeling it's we'll see. We'll see, because I think the tension's really going to hit this peak, and where I think I would expect to see Aegon and Aemon, and I actually want to see Aegon and Aemon out on the field, and not just sitting around all the time. So I think that at some point that Laris is going to lose control of it, but right now he's kind of got Aegon wrapped around his finger.
Brandon in the chat with his title, Lord Confessor. That's what it was. So
Yeah,
that's
what the hell is that? What
it sounds like an interrogator or some kind
Yeah.
Which he did do a lot of, to be fair.
The
Then
Duke
why-
of Torture.
Why does he give Aegon advice? Like, why does, like, the one episode, I think it was the first episode, where he takes Aegon aside and is like, excuse me, but I think Otto is just trying to screw you over, blah, blah, blah. Like, why does he even follow Laris out to talk to him? Like, why is he even that important that Aegon should even listen to him at that point?
Maybe
Because
Lord Confessor's a high title. I don't know.
because Aegon's an idiot, or as Brandon says, Aegon the incompetent. I think that's a proper title. Well, no, it's just, again, it's showing he's not prepared for it. He doesn't have the mindset, and now he doesn't have any counsel to guide him. So yes, he's going to fall apart. And certainly, if he and Aemon goes out, certainly with the way that we end things, Aemon would wipe the floor with him. He's the psychotic fighter of the family, and Aegon's just filled with ego. He can listen to it, again, if he appeals to it. I don't want people to think that I'm being manipulated. Thank you, Laris, for clearing that up. So that does get him to stay, but I think you're right. I think eventually it's going to spiral out, because the one thing we're seeing is we don't have any control here. Though I think my favorite part of this scene is when his drinking buddy friends are like, yeah, we're going to go get this one guy laid. And he's like, did you take a vow of celibacy? I just wanted to see that held before he totally laughed out. The guys are like, oh, yeah. Wait, are you serious? I mean, that was my favorite moment, kind of, in that whole scene right there, because Laris is doing Laris's thing, and I'm glad that he's gotten himself in position. That was his plan. He has succeeded. But underlying everything on the green side of things is just unpreparedness and things about to fall apart.
Yeah, and we see how Aegon sticks to that, because he does it. No, you have a vow of celibacy, but then we see a later scene where Aegon doesn't necessarily seem to care.
No, he doesn't.
I think he was fucking with them.
I think he did crack a smile at the end of that. It's
Oh, I
kind of
didn't
like,
think he did. I thought they were like, "You're serious?" He's like, "Yes, I'm very serious." But I don't know. You might be right. You might.
I had to. It could have just been in my head going, "Is this when he smiles and laughs it off?" Because yeah, obviously later on, that's not really an issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Brandon in the chat, the definition of a Lord Confessor was the Lord Confessor served as the royal torturer. Yeah,
Which I think was the douche anyway, because he was torturing people.
yeah.
I just don't know how that gives him so much power where he can take Aegon aside and give him advice.
No, I don't know. He's just a
Yes, he
creepy
tortures people. Okay, great. But why do you get to talk to the king?
Because Aegon doesn't know enough not to listen to him.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is probably the answer.
All right, so we get introduction to the character of Ulf, who Alyssa and I talked about. And is this the character you're talking about where we're like, is this guy? Yeah.
I don't think they've named in the show yet. I don't think they give him a name. We just know it's who it is. From
yeah, but apparently he was in the last episode. We just didn't realize that was him.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, he showed up. It was like, who are these guys hanging?
He was the guy who was like, who are these guys hanging up? Yeah.
Yeah.
So his name is Ulf. Ulf White or Ulf the White? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's Ulf the White. But the scene I was watching, I was like, they really want you to know that his name is Ulf because he goes to the bar and everyone's like, Ulf, oh, and they're saying his name over and over again. But that was kind of an interesting scene with him being like, oh, yes, I'm actually the brother. So is he saying that he's the bastard brother of Viserys and Daemon?
Yes, he was saying his father was is it Baylor? I always get the Bager or Bega, whoever Viserys' his father was. Brandon will say in the chat. I think Baylor. Yeah. That he's the bastard son of him, so he would be the bastard brother of Viserys and Daemon. Is what he is saying. I think.
Yeah, and it was funny. He's talking to his friends and trying to convince them, like, "Oh no, you're full of shit because you don't have the right color hair." He's like, "Well, actually, the what's this, Viserys Valerion, the rightful heir to the throne," and he says that right as Aegon comes in, he has his back turned. It seems like everyone was like quiet too, got quiet immediately right when he said, "Oh yeah," but for some reason Aegon didn't hear that. I was expecting.
Oh no, because he immediately went, "Oh, hail Aegon the King!" to like,
yes, he did to cover that up. But I still thought Aegon would have heard that because everyone was like quiet right when he said, "Prince of Valerion, the rightful heir to the throne." But yeah, he almost got himself killed because he kept talking about, don't tell anyone because they could take my head. So it's interesting exposition, interesting way to introduce this character. Darren, we'll start with you since you don't know who this character is.
If you're substituting interesting for clunky, yeah, I completely agree.
I don't think it was clunky, but
no, I mean, again, it was kind of fine, but it was like a definite like background exposition. The fact that he lends it right at that moment to give us that, and the king heard that, but then he didn't, and he turns around and moves on. It was just kind of like, okay, well, that's kind of a little obvious how you're setting things up and why now we have been paying attention to this character. It's fine. I like the character. I like the actor, the embodiment, the whole energy going on there. It was just kind of like, because I do remember seeing him last week. There was a couple of weird edits in last week's episode, and his was in one of them where he was talking to whoever his wife was, and they did a weird, I won't get into it, but there's just a weird sit and change of angle where it was kind of confusing where everyone is. And there was like a couple of those last week, which kind of just stuck out in my head, which is why, though, I remember this character like, oh yeah, we saw him last week. So I get while he's here now, then that background gives us the connection. But I did think that was kind of a, I don't know, obvious, straightforward way, I guess would be the nicest way of connecting that and then getting us into our eventual
but I
Aegon.
seen this character's wife.
No, that's a different character. That's Hugh the Hammer.
You're thinking of a different
Oh, I'm thinking of Hugh the Hammer. Okay. Well, then see, there we go. I guess that's why they said Ulf constantly, because I was thinking this was someone else.
We haven't seen, the only time we saw him was, Mark pointed out, he went up to the people hanging. It was like, who are these guys hanging? Like, who are that was basically all he did last week.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy with the wife was the blacksmith from the first episode.
Yeah.
Right, because they were talking about the monies.
This will all make sense later.
Oh, I'm sure we'll all definitely come together, but right now I'm just kind of like, all right, now I'm just starting to get lost. So
yeah, it's just like I would feel that way. I feel like if I had not read the book and know who these characters are, I'd be like, why do we care about this guy? Like,
but I think it's better that they slowly introduce them now rather than waiting for when their parts come on and being like, boom, here's these characters.
Yeah, which is how it is in the book. There's like, here's this guy and here's that guy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, you should definitely weave people in beforehand, because otherwise they become like Deus Ex Machina characters. It's just kind of like this person shows up to do this thing and then we've never heard of them before or again.
Yeah. No, so I think that's good. See, I have to point out, because you guys never saw the show Our Flag Means Death, did you? Because there's a bunch of people sitting around the table and there's this black guy there. And I'm like, hey, it's the guy from Our Flag Means Death. And he doesn't really have any lines, I don't think. He might just go like, ooh, ah, ooh. Like I didn't notice that he actually like spoke any lines. And I'm like, but he was like not the star, but he was one of the main characters in this other HBO show. So I'm like, that made me think, like, is this character gonna do something? Because why would they hire that actor who was like actually in another HBO show just to sit there and like not say anything? Or he might have had like one line or something. As the black dude who was sitting around the table with him. I was like,
I would expect to, because otherwise, why are we being introduced to these people? I mean, they can't be there just to serve as exposition fodder. They have to be kind of setting something up. Why is this introduction happening? So, I think we gotta see more of them at some point.
Well, I thought they were just there to introduce Ulf.
yeah, I thought so too. But then the one guy is an actor from Flag Means Death. I'm like, why is he there just to just like not say anything? Like,
maybe he's a big game. Maybe he's a big Game of Thrones fan and he wanted the cameo.
Maybe.
You just put me in the bar somewhere. Yeah. Just put me in a bar somewhere. I'll be totally happy. I'll even hide my Starbucks cup. Come on, guys. Cool. I'll be on it.
Well, but you know who else was in Our Flag Means Death? Is the guy who played Hodor. So maybe he became friends with the guy who played Hodor and was like jealous that he got to be in Game of Thrones. Like, well, I want to be in Game of Thrones too. So he so he just sit there and like, I don't think he actually had any lines. I think he was just kind of there.
Just HBO nepotism, man. Just HBO nepotism.
That's the thing that stuck out to me on this scene. It's like, hey, that guy, why is he not talking?
Do you ever notice that though, that the actors seem to stick to certain like services? Like there's certain actors you see in like all the Netflix stuff but no other stuff, and some actors you see in all the
there are. That is true. There are actors.
Hey, you get a reliable character actor and you connect with a good few casting agents and such, they will just remember you constantly. And if you're in the system, I mean, you'd see that on Sci-Fi Network all the time. You'd see people from one show over in another show and jumping back and forth. So,
that's because they all shot in Toronto. But anyway, or Vancouver. It was Vancouver, then it was Toronto. But anyway, off topic. So next scene that we get is with the brothel scene with Aegon, like doing his initiation thing with the new one, like joking around, and then they just happen. I think, was he looking for that one prostitute that Aemon was with? Yeah. And so he finally finds her, and Aemon's there, and he thinks, oh, it's making fun of him and saying, are you still with the first one? And it shows like what a dick he was, and also it's like
it also shows what a dick he has too.
Yes. Well, it showed Aemon's dick, but it showed Aegon being a dick, and Aemon. But But yeah, it shows that how Eamon was always picked on as a kid as well, and how he still has that complex about that, and that he was kind of just, instead of like arguing with them and being like "fuck you," he was just like, "No, she means nothing to me. You're welcome to her, whatever. I don't give a shit," and just walks out naked, whatever. But
I'm embarrassed by nothing.
yeah. But yeah, Aegon the whole time was like, "Oh, look at the strong Aemon. Oh, he's curled up like a baby." And I'm like, "Shut up."
This is just showing why Daemon kills Aegon later on. You know, I mean, I don't know how that happens, but this I would suspect some sort of willingness backstabbery, or just, well, I may not stop him from going out and riding his dragon if he wants. He's not prepared to do it, but that's his choice.
Yeah, it's interesting because he definitely still has that complex, but at the same time, he is loyal to his brother because I think he cares more about duty and honor more than Aegon does, and we saw that at the end of last season. That okay, this is his role. He's accepted it. That he will be there to support his brother's claim to the king. He wishes it was him, but it's not. So I think he's accepted that reality. But at the same time, yeah, he's Aegon is still treating him like he was when they were little kids, and still mocking him and making fun of them. So he has to reconcile with that. I find Aemon to be a really interesting character. He's one of the more interesting ones on the green side of things. And I like the scene with him and the prostitute last week as well. So really interested in seeing how the show is going to develop this dynamic between these two characters, between these two brothers. And also, it's weird to me that Aegon is older because Aemon actor looks older to me. So in my head, I know that Aegon is older because he's the king and Aemon is the younger brother, but like the actor looks younger. But I don't know what their ages are in real life, but he definitely looks younger.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Aemond is the Daemon of the family. He is the most interesting there because I just used Daemon's name to refer to Aemon.
Yeah. They're very similar characters. They play similar roles.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's exactly it. It's the brother that thinks they should be king, but isn't, but is fiercely loyal, but is also willing to look for their own way and direction. I think he's got a definitely stronger understanding just because he knew that he was second. So therefore, he just found the role that would work for him, much the same way that Daemon did. So he is by far the most interesting character on the green side. Is kind of the only one that I'm just like, I'm kind of waiting for him to do his breakout just because he's the most interesting one to watch. And I think they could do some real interesting directions. And I think especially like a him versus Daemon fight. I don't know if that's like a climax part or a middle point, but kind of looking forward to seeing those two.
Yeah, the show's really, really fleshed this character out and made it much more interesting. In the book, it's just like evil guy, but in here we get like a lot more dynamic, which is really good. But anyway, so again, I'm gonna kind of mush two scenes together. This is the earlier scene we get with Kristen Cole meeting. God, what the hell is his name again? Dwayne.
Yeah, Gawain.
Yeah. He seems a bit like a bit of a preppy, sort of arrogant prick. If he was in the like 80s movie, he'd be wearing one of those sweaters like tied around.
He's the villain in a John Cusack movie, okay? That's what he is.
Yeah, you could tell someone was a douche in an 80s movie if they had the sweater.
But he's obviously pissy with Cole because of his father getting fired and Cole replacing him. And to be fair, he's kind of justified in doing so. But we see that he's like, insists on going out with Cole, which, as we sort of see, he has no experience. And this is kind of getting back to how there was peace in Westeros for so long that most of these knights and most of these people are untrained in the way of war. And that's what Kristen Cole sets him apart. As much as we all hate him, that's what sets him apart. Is he actually did have battle experience, and it was interesting getting that scene when they were out in the field, and he was like, "Oh, we're gonna stay at an inn," and Kristen Cole's like, "What? What the hell are you guys talking about? Staying at an inn?" And then they looks up and it's like, "Wait a second, we're out in the open," and they see the dragon, and that was a really good scene. I really liked it. And a good use of Bela. We actually got to see her do something, and that dragon like chasing after them, like literally running for their lives. I do wonder though, if they hadn't made the trees, would she have killed them? Because Rhaenyra specifically told her not to do anything. Do you think that she would have killed them if she could have? Alyssa.
Yeah, Alyssa, go ahead first.
That's an interesting question, and I feel like she already kind of did more than Rhaenyra wanted her to do just by simply chasing them.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like, how would you not? You know, if she had a shot, like, why is she even chasing after them if she's not gonna finish the job? So I feel like that if those trees weren't there and she had a shot at them, why wouldn't she? Like, I feel like she would have, and then just be like, and just take whatever's coming to her from Rhaenyra. Oh, sorry, I killed the hand of the king and the most important general that they have. Sorry, you know. I don't know, but I guess at that point, Rhaenyra is still trying to, prevent war from happening and all of that, and like what isn't fully committed to the war. So I get that, but if you're Bela, you kind of got to do it if you if you have the opportunity. So I kind of think she would have. Otherwise, why is she even diving down after them like that? But yeah, that was a good scene. And I hate that Kristen Cole's right, but he it really irks me that he's right. But he is. He's not really good at being the hand of the king, but he is good for this sort of thing, a field general. So, which is why I think they should have just made Aemon hand of the king, and he can be the field general and just work on this. Like, just do this. But in any case, yeah, I did like the scene. And Gwaine is a douchebag. Definitely 80s sweater around the neck vibes for sure. And if he's being a dick to Kristen because he put his father out of a job, wait till he finds out he's fucking his sister, and then we'll see how much he really likes Kristen then. But yes, I did really like this scene. Probably the most, the only bit of like kind of excitement that we get in this episode at all.
Yeah, yes to all of that. And yeah, I completely agree. This is one of the more exciting, kind of like invigorating scenes. Like, yeah, and I liked it. But there is that question of what would you have done, and would it have been the right thing? Because I like the fact that they're out in the open and they spot the dragon that he can see it. I'm like, looking at him like, is that dust on my TV, or am I seeing the dragon that he's seeing? I mean, they did that very subtly right out of the sun very well. I really appreciated that. And like you said, Kristen's one quality, if you want to put it, is the fact that he is an experienced fighter. He's been experienced in conflict. So his reaction, it makes a lot more sense. But I also don't understand, like, okay, so why was she there? I thought she was looking over else. Where was she was looking over King's Landing, but I see that more as a coastal stuff, and this was much more inland, which is,
I think she had a pretty wide area.
sure. Again, it's just one of those
Yeah.
coincidence that she is there. And that, yeah, definitely going after, but I was expecting at least to see a blast of fire at the end as opposed to just kind of sweeping after, because then I was like, well, pretty convenient that they managed to get to the woods just in time, but that's also how TV works. No problem. but yeah, then like, so what was your goal? Were you going to kill them? Were you going to scare them? Were you going to try and drag one off and drop it from thousands of feet? I mean, what exactly was the plan there? So while I really enjoyed it, I was also a little confused and bummed of like, you didn't even get like one little shot off, just a little singe of a tree there at the end. Yeah.
She could have burned the trees. I mean, she could have set the forest on fire, I feel like, if she wanted to.
Sure, but I get the restraint on doing that, but at least that first shot, because yes, she had swooped down and it was really, I mean, again, very tensely done, but it was like, well, what's your plan then? Because you could see the trees are coming up, that you're going to run out of time. What, why even be that close? So that, I mean, again, that was the only thing. It's a scene construction part. Like,
Well, she
what was the
almost
goal?
She could have gotten to them.
Well, maybe she wanted to get closer to confirm that it was who she thought it was. Like, she probably couldn't tell it was Kristen Cole from way up there. And when she got closer, she's like, "Oh yeah, Kristen Cole. I'm going to go back into the mirror."
Yeah.
But I think she would have killed them too. I think that she could have gotten to them because they just barely made it to the trees.
Yeah.
And the other funny thing is after, they made it to safety and Gwen was like, "Oh, thank you so much for saying." He was like, "No fucking ends."
You're going to remember this for a while. And we're going to remember that you remember it because we can all smell you. We know what you did in your armor there, mister.
All right, so then we get the second Black Council meeting that's following after Bela comes back and reports that Kristen Cole's, off doing shit. And then everyone's like, "Oh, yes, we got us in the dragons out there. They're getting ready for war. We need to counter it." And I think they actually have a good point. And this is when Rhaenyra sort of brings up a really interesting point about, I don't know if it was the first scene or this one. I think it was this one about dragons kind of comparing it to like nuclear weapons, that they need to be like a deterrent, and that once you start using them, it's kind of like getting into nuclear war. It's like then all hell breaks loose, and then just people are going to die by the thousands, and it's going to be terrible, which is why she's hesitant to use the dragons. But it's really the only advantage that she has to her. So it was interesting. And this time she doesn't like tell them to fuck off. This time she's like, "I will consider your words." So it sort of takes them a bit more seriously.
Yeah, and I think this is when she wants to go off and like, okay, she heard what Rainey said earlier, and so it's like, okay, I have one last chance before, like, they're starting to make too much sense now, and I think I kind of have to listen to them, but this is my one last chance. So I think this is probably when she decides to like, okay, I need to go get Alicent. And because I think that she is starting to see that, yeah, there aren't a whole lot of other options other than to listen to what these guys are saying at this point. After we've gotten this report that Kristen Cole is mounting this force and doing this, that this is my one last chance to try to prevent more and go to Alicent. I think that was her last ditch effort. But yeah, I think she was seeing that those guys were actually starting to make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much covers everything there. I have nothing to add.
All right, so then we go back to Harrenhal to get the creepy vision. We get the cameo from, what's her name?
Millie Alcock.
Millie Alcock.
It was so cool to see Millie Alcock. It was way to like bring her back into the show for like a minute.
Yeah, because I didn't really know what was going on at first when he went into I didn't realize it was like a dream, and then he goes into the room and there's someone with blonde hair, and then turns around. I was like, "Oh shit, it's young Rhaenyra." So this must be a vision, and the whole thing is like, I don't know. I don't know if I had much to say about it, except that it's really creepy. It's kind of reminiscent of the old visions and the prophecies and shit that they used to have in Game of Thrones. And I guess it got sort of into his guilt, which is interesting, getting into the guilt that Damon's feeling, and maybe it symbolizes that how he sort of corrupted Rhaenyra, and or that he still has I don't know, still thinks of the younger person that she used to be. I don't know. I just thought it was very creepy. And then, of course, we get the very creepy Alice Rivers popping up. And what'd she say exactly? Something like, "You're going to die here," or something like this. Or
Yeah, she is. I think she's prophesizing that he's going to die there. As well.
I couldn't tell because obviously that first part was a dream, but was that second part also a dream when he was out in the open and she was?
I think that the second part is being him waking up and being reality, but maybe not. I don't know. So he was in by the gods tree, like the gods.
Yeah.
I did not know it was a thing in Harrenhal. So maybe it was also a dream. I don't know. For some reason, I was taking it as this is real life now, but maybe not. It's actually hard to say.
Is this real life or is it just fantasy?
Yeah, to me, he was up with the Starks up in Winterfell. So that's the impression that I got from it. So that was all still a dream, even with her popping up into it at the end. Because
wait, wasn't it outside of Harrenhal?
It might have been. I'm just saying when I was watching it, that was the impression that I got, was that this was actually at Winterfell.
No, I mean, because there's Godswood trees and King's Landing, like they're everywhere. So there was one that Rhaenyra used to hang out at in season 1. So those, I mean, I took that as that's at Harrenhal.
Well, it made a lot more sense, but that's what I was thinking, because I was thinking the same thing you were talking about, Mark. Is this still a dream or is this real life? Did he in his somnambulism wander outside and find himself here while he was having that previous vision, or is he still in the dream? And that's when I was like, well, Harrenhal seems obvious. Is she talking about Winterfell? Because this looks like a god's tree. And I was trying to remember what the outside of Winterfell looked from that position. And then it ended. So Harrenhal makes a lot more sense. But, also you're going to die here is just like, all right, creepy one. Here, take a corner. Get away.
This is a creepy lady. I'm really looking forward to, because she's like really just, it's a history book. The way it's described. Oh, some say she was a witch, and some say she was 40, and some blah, blah, blah. And like it's very just matter of fact. But I think I'm already seeing how the show is really going to be like making her really creepy.
They've already made her interesting.
Yeah.
So now build on that. Oh yeah, I completely agree with just her little shot earlier in the background, and then just coming up and saying her thing here. It's like, okay, so you're the freak, the freako of Harrenhal. All right, I want to know more about you. Everyone else is boring.
See, maybe I was gonna say maybe I need to reread the book again, because I remember reading the section that explains her and says who she is, but I don't remember her actually doing anything.
Yeah, she does. She just kind of like, oh, they say this. I mean, and some of it was like conjecture, like how much of a witch she is. Some say she's this, some say she's that. But yeah, and she doesn't really do anything. This is why I'm like, I really love this scene, because I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna get some Alice Rivers, and she's gonna be creepy as fuck, and I love it. We need a Melisandre type character in this show, so but she could potentially be that. So
apparently, someone attached with the show had to go out and say that no, this isn't going to be a repeat of Melisandre. It's not going to be exactly like her.
Exactly, but it's in the same vibe. This creepy witch lady.
No, absolutely, and that's what I thought. I never thought that they were copying Melisandre, but apparently some people did.
No, I don't think that at all. I think I want a Melisandre type.
Yes,
creepy witch lady. She's going to be totally different. Like, and she's got the black hair. Like, if she was like, if a black cat went by, I mean, that would be a little cheesy, but also would fit the vibe. Like, I kind of, I like the vibe that they're setting up with her. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with her and Daemon and Harrenhal.
No, they can't do a thing like Cat's Paw from the original. It's a boy.
Yeah. Can't go by and have 3 witches go. Yeah.
All right. Oh,
No.
darn. All
No,
right.
I don't have anything else to add
Okay.
on top of that. Yeah.
So let's move to the final scene between Rhaenyra and Alicent. This was a super intense scene. Some people question how plausible it is, but I don't care. I'm willing to just go with it. I think it's a very interesting because these two characters are so good interacting with each other. We can't go all season without seeing the two of them on screen together. So this is as good an excuse to any to get them together. And God, it was just so intense though, the way that she dressed up as a septa and they were walking through King's Landing. I mean, obviously, like I knew logically that she wasn't going to die right here or anything because then we still need the show, but it was still very intense and getting there and then actually having the two of them like meet. It was so good. It was such a well acted scene, and again, totally original to the show. I did hear the argument though that maybe this happened in the books, but in the books is a history book and only tells it from a historical perspective, and this was a secret meeting, so no one would actually know about it. But either way, I think this is um they touch back on. I like how they're sort of arguing with each other, like you killed my grandson, no I didn't, you killed my son, no I didn't, that that sort of thing. But getting into the whole prophecy that the whole thing that Viserys said right before he died, um that Alicent mistook for him saying he wanted Aegon to be king, but he was actually talking about Aegon the Conqueror. I didn't think that Alicent would ever find out that that's not true, but I think that that is definitely what happened. And so I was actually really surprised they went in that direction. Um, and it's interesting because when Allison first said, I swear on the memory of my mother, that he definitely said that Aegon should be king. And so Rhaenyra believed her. Obviously, because she knows Allison, knows that she wouldn't say anything like that lightly. So she started crying because in that moment she believed that her father actually did change his mind until she said, what exactly did it say in the Princess Promise? And it was like, oh, wait a second, he told you about the prophecy? She's like, what prophecy? And then it became, and it's funny because as soon as Rhaenyra says it's a story about Aegon the Conqueror, you hear Allison go, Aegon the Conqueror, and starting to realize that it was a different Aegon. And then Rhaenyra instantly knows it, but Allison is still in denial. Is like, no, there's been no mistake. But I think she knows. She knows now that she made a huge mistake, and so that is very interesting. That how that would affect the future. That Allison knows that she misinterpreted, a dying guy who's half, out of it, misinterpreted his words and started a whole war because of it. Now, granted, Otto and all those other people are already planning to put Aegon II on the throne anyway, regardless. But she wouldn't have been so gung ho pushing that. So anyway, Alyssa, we'll start with you with this thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if she really. I mean, she knows in a subconscious level, but I don't know that she's admitting it to herself. I think when she denies it and says there is no mistake, I think she's also convincing herself of that too. So she has to believe that's what he said. Otherwise, all of this would have happened for nothing, and she would have gotten involved in this, and her hands become really bloody now, and it's all for nothing. Whereas she should have just let Rhaenyra be queen, or should have at least been a voice in the room, being a proponent for giving Rhaenyra her rightful crown. But after all of this, she can't go back. There's no going back. So she has to believe. I think so. I think there's a level of denial here. And moving forward, I think she's going to say, "I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that." No. He definitely changed his mind, because I think she has to believe that after all that has happened already. Also, I heard the interpretation that she was saying to Rhaenyra, Well, actually, this might have even been in the inside the episode. No, I think about it. It might have been Ryan Condal saying this, which I guess kind of makes it somewhat official. That she was what was also. Oh God, I just lost my train of thought. I'm 50 years old now, so I get brain farts.
I really want to know something that Ryan Condal
Yeah,
might have
so
said.
inside the episode, there was an interpretation. It'll come back to me. Where yeah, Allison really wanted Rhaenyra to oh, it's gone. It'll come back. Go to Darren and it'll come back to me.
I can't remember what I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I didn't watch the inside the episode, so I can't help you.
Okay, what was I talking about just before this?
Something
I'm
about
52. That's already too far back in time to ask me.
Rhaenyra and Alicent and her thinking that Aegon is misinterpreting the words and whether or not
file. Yeah, and the oh, I remember what it is now. I knew it'd come back to me. Also, that she was communicating to Rhaenyra that it's too late. There's no going back at this point.
Oh yes, no, she did say right. Allison did say right before she left. She was like, did mention my father's gone, Kristen Cole's out. There's and you know what kind of monster Aemon is. So yeah, so that was her saying no, we can't have pieces too late.
Yeah, so it was partly that it's like even if I wanted to, I couldn't stop this. Like the machine is already rolling. Like it's already going. But part of it too, I think that she was in denial that this could have been prevented, like if she had not misunderstood what Viserys said. I don't think she wants to believe that it was a misunderstanding, because then that means she could have prevented all of this from happening. Or at least tried. Yeah. Who knows if she would have actually been successful, because as you said, they were already planning to put Aegon on the throne to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much nice about this scene, and the fact that this is the kind of like last attempt to see if we can hold this off. And even Rhaenyra is saying, hey, can we do it? And there was a lot to like in this scene. I was a little bummed with some of its setup and some of the choices, and the fact that we have no idea what Allison actually said in her message. We get a little brief look at it as the scroll is opened up. But since Allison is so surprised when Rhaenyra shows up and then starts talking about a peace type kind of thing, it was hard to see what the context, because apparently from what I got from the way the scene was constructed is Allison just reaching out in some way of like wishing that they could find peace. And that is what Rhaenyra is responding to. When Rhaenyra shows up and Allison reacts to her, I mean, outside of the surprise of you're here, the quest for can we find a way to do peace seems to take her aback a little bit. So I just wish I knew what the scroll actually said, so I could have put this kind of approach in a little bit more context from a audience standpoint. And while it was cool to see Rhaenyra dressed up and walking through the town and everything, I actually thought that was the wrong choice to do, because we already know that Daemon can get into town. So her ability to get into town isn't so much questioned. I just think it would have been more interesting to have followed Alicent around and then suddenly have Rhaenyra just show up next to her in the whole thing, because you could see in the habit that nobody would recognize her. You could even do a little sneak thing as Alicent just walking through. I would just, again, it kind of removes that kind of cool surprise moment, because they're talking like, how would I get in? And there's like, oh, it's like this. And then you come up and obviously you're going to walk up to her because she's doing her prayer thing. I just think that it would have been a little more impactful. And again, this isn't a critique of the show, because telling the show, why didn't you do what I would like you to do, is not a criticism. That's why I'm just saying I would have liked it structured a little bit. And also I was hoping that the first words out of her mouth was, I am so sorry about your grandson. I had nothing to do with it. That was the intro she needed to have, not stumble and pull out a knife and then try to do a little thing back and forth of like, oh, why are you here? And so we can get the accusation and then clear it up. It just, to me, it just made it a little rougher than it could have been. And so it just took up time that I think could have been either spent better elsewhere or really working the dynamic between the two of them, because they are really good together.
Well, I think she needed to pull the knife, though, because she needed that insurance. Because if she starts it and goes, "Oh, I'm really sorry about your grandson. I didn't mean it," Allison, for all she knows, can go, "Guards, like, so I think she needed that knife needed to be there.
Sure. I just think that would have been the second move before Allison reacted to show that if that was a thing, as opposed to kind of like, "Hi, I've got a knife. Like, I'm here to kill you."
Right.
To me, was that first is that first feeling I got from the interactions. That's all I'm talking about, is a little clunky in that sense.
And I can see what you're saying about it. That would be kind of a cool surprise, like if she, we followed Allison's perspective. But I actually like the way they did it here better, because to me, as I said, I felt the tension. Seeing her walk through to King's Landing with a Kingsguard and how vulnerable she was, and the whole time thinking that anyone recognized her, she's screwed. So I thought that was a very high tension scene. So I thought personally that worked a bit better.
Sure. And as I say, that's what I'm saying. It's totally an interpretive type of bit. Again, it was just sort of what I was thinking watching this, was kind of like, oh man, that would have been cool to see this, but making choices to film like, oh, wouldn't that be cool to, that's always the wrong choice. So I'm just I'll throw that out there. But again, I did like the back and forth, and I did like that clarification of the story, because to me, what it actually shows at the end is that Allison knows that she's in the wrong, because she was using the excuse that I believe the king said that my son should be king, when in a way, she was always pushing that other way. As Hightower and everything else, that's always what she wanted. And she used an excuse, and now she knows that her excuse is bullshit. And she should have known better. And to me, that removes any excuse that she might have had to try and graft that she has a legitimacy for her choice. And I think it's just important to separate these two sides in that sense, because there's one to think that like, oh, I was just mistaken.
Well, it is interesting though that the night before that Viserys died, she did tell Rhaenyra, "I think you'll make a great queen." And I think she meant it. And Rhaenyra even brings that up. Yeah. Like, you even said that. So I think that Allison would have actually wouldn't have tried to push Aegon if it wasn't for this whole thing. But again, Allison kind of heard what she wanted to hear.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It gave her the excuse that she wanted to hear in order to make that choice, because, the dying, rambling, half-conscious, like, remarks of your king, just to completely backside everything that he's been saying up until, like, just recently, yanking himself out of a dying bed to go downstairs and go, "By the way, she's still my heir." That's kind of why I liked it. I like the tension, because you're right. There does seem a moment that Rhaenyra is going to be like, "I'm in the wrong. Dad made a different choice." And that gives her the power to stop it also, to be like, I can willingly go, my dad made a different choice, and I want to follow what his wishes were, even if I don't agree with them, and I can stop this war. Again, that is a strong standpoint, versus Allison, when she finds out the truth, is like, "No, fucking sorry, it's already gone too far. You better get out of here, man, because I'm gonna start yelling in like 3 minutes." Just I mean, she didn't say that last part. But to me, it just underlines the fact that Allison knows that her request is illegitimate, and she can't use that excuse anymore, where now Rhaenyra is just like, "No, I'm supposed to be queen. My dad wanted me to be queen, and she knows that she's doing the wrong thing, so now I have to fight her."
So the one thing I think is interesting is that back in season 1, we had the scene with Viserys, like, saying Aegon, and Allison mistook it. I remember criticizing that scene. I hated it. I thought it was really dumb. Like, this is why she puts Aegon on the throat, because she got her Aegons mixed up. But this scene actually makes me like that scene better. like, and for whatever reason, the fact that she actually finds out about it makes me more okay with it. It's like
Well,
the show was going a different angle with this.
it adds a better context. Before, if it was just, again, the quiet scene that no one knew about that could be her self-quiet excuse for things, that would be one. The fact that now it's exposed adds an element of depth, and oh my god, now there's gravity to that. Not only did I make a mistake, I kind of knew I was making a mistake. I mean, I didn't. He said Aegon, and we all name our kids Aegon, so it's really easy to confuse that.
If you were more creative with your names, this problem wouldn't happen.
You guys know there's other letters in the alphabet, right? That's
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my only little extra thought on that.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because it just adds to the like I don't just how preventable this this actually could have been, and it kind of feeds into this to the line that Rainey said earlier, like when did this really start? You know, was it when Aemon cut out Lucerys's eye? Was it when, or other way around, or when Lucerys was killed by Aemon, or was it when the Blood and Cheese killed Jaehaera? Like when really did this all start? Like, and you're right. Even though Alicent, gave the green light for it, um, no pun intended, but for them to go ahead and put Aegon on the throne, they were already planning that. So, like, where does this really begin? And but it it could have been prevented. There's so many different ways that it could have been prevented. 100 times over, and Allison now sees that like this is a thing that I could have done. I could have known. I could have stopped this, but now it's too late. And now, I still believe that she is going to be and at least partially in denial. Like she can't possibly fully admit, even though she knows she fucked up, but she can't ever really fully admit it. She definitely won't admit it to anyone else ever. She will keep insisting to anyone else she talks to that, oh yeah, he totally changed his mind in his deathbed, but she now knows that that's wrong, and I think it's going to be hard for her to admit it to herself even.
And so that does bring up an interesting point that Rhaenyra, that they've already reached the point of no return. That Rhaenyra trying to make peace, and Rhaenys saying, "Oh, we can still make peace," is actually that's not feasible. That they're kind of deluding themselves to thinking that's possible now that they passed that point already.
So now Rhaenyra has to go back to those Black Council, do the old white guys, and be like, do what you need to do. Like, I mean, there is no other choice at this point. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think this was her one last desperate attempt. Okay, well, these white guys, they're starting to make sense. Well, I got one last thing that I want to try. And now that she now sees that there is no going back, there's no preventing this war, she now has to reluctantly go back to those dudes and be like, okay, send out the dragons. There's a line in the trailer. You hear Rhaenyra's voice saying something along the lines of like, "What I have unleashed onto the world."
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact line, but I think you're going to hear a little bit of regret in it. But she has no other choice, and I think she sees that she has no other choice at this point.
And this is why I think that I love this show, and I think it's so much better than the books. It's such a much better adaptation. Is that in the books it was just like two mad, Alicent and Rhaenyra were just these, mad evil people like, oh, I want to be in charge, but there's so much more like dynamic and so much more to it in the show.
Much more nuance to these characters.
Nuance, yes.
Yeah, they're both much more nuanced characters in the way that they're portrayed in the book. But again, you can frame everything like, and I see a lot of other YouTube videos doing this. You can frame it like, well, that was told from a historical perspective.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
but the show is showing you what actually happened, and so you can look at it that way.
And that's part of the reason why I think I'm kind of liking this show better than Game of Thrones, just because I think it's better to adapt something like this, which is this vague history book, because it leaves so much more open. You can do much more with it. Whereas something like A Song of Ice and Fire that's already full is much harder to adapt.
Simpler, but knowing how it ends versus more complex, but just guessing in the end. Okay. Yeah, I get it.
Knowing how it ends is very important too. That is very important. That's why I have strong faith that the ending of this show will be good, because they actually have it written out.
They have an ending.
They always know where the end point is. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if I should mention this, but the ending of this show is spoiled in Game of Thrones. A couple of lines of Game of Thrones, they spoiled what happened at the end. Don't go looking for it if you don't want to be spoiled.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Oh, you didn't know that? I won't tell the specific scene, but no, it was actually twice they spoiled the ending. Because I knew the ending before I even read the book, because I remember watching and seeing them. They talked about it in Game of Thrones.
See, those are limitations when you can't see the future. You don't know that you're spoiling things later on that they're going to want to spoil. It's just,
Yeah. Anyway, all right. So we'll go ahead and end this discussion here. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us live in the chat. We had Aaron, Brandon, Rob. I think Alex was there earlier, and anyone else who dropped by. Thanks so much. And anyone
popped in for a second, I want to say shout out to Fiona.
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely. And anyone else watching this who didn't comment, and anyone watching in the archives, thanks so much for checking this out. And thank you so much for my special guests, Alyssa and Darrin. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure. So Alyssa, we'll start with you if you want to let people know where they can find you or what you're up to.
First, I'm just getting a little chuckle of Alex 409 says, spoiler alert for the Aegon the Conqueror show. Aegon won. Well, there's no point in watching that show now.
Aegon, how's it's going to turn out? Yeah.
Anyways, you can find me over in Alyssa Jean's reviews, but honestly, you mostly can find me here these days. I'll be here every Monday. Well, maybe I'll take a week off here and there to make room for other guests, but I'll be here most Mondays, I should say. Otherwise, you can go and watch my season 2 predictions for House of the Dragon. That's my most recent video. Otherwise, not doing a whole ton of stuff in 2024, but you can watch all the previous stuff that I did on House of the Dragon and Star Trek and all that stuff. So, Alyssa Jean's reviews.
And I used to host D's reviews. Haven't done anything on that for a while. But I'm always excited to be here. We'll be here for the rest of the House of the Dragon. I did just do a little discussion over with Rob over at Smirking Gun Reviews. It is still Smirking Gun. It's not just Smirking Reviews. Is that right?
I think it's just Smirking Reviews.
Smirking Reviews.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob. I'm old. I remember things from long ago, but not from yesterday.
But his username's still Smirking Guns.
It still says Smirking Gun, yeah. Anyway, over there at Rob's channel, we just did a discussion about the first half of The Boys season 4. So that was a really fun. Episode. So if you want to dive into a little bit of The Boys, you can check that out over on Rob's Smirking Reviews. Otherwise, I am here most Mondays talking House of the Dragon and occasionally doing other stuff. We actually just had a great discussion on season 1 of The Expanse, Mark and I. So you guys should definitely check that out. I kept watching. I'm now in season 4. That's just what's going to happen.
You're going to have to watch again.
That's just what's going to happen.
I just started season 2, so
yeah,
we'll get there eventually.
It's so good. Anyway, oh yeah, Bertaluda.
All right, and so my name's Mark. If you're finding me for the first time, Channels Enchantment of Eternity. We'll be doing these House of the Dragon live discussions every week, every Monday night after the episode. I also do my own review, very brief review after the episode airs on Sunday, and also doing a lot of Star Trek videos. Currently covering season 5 of The Next Generation. So you can be sure to check me out there. And yeah, thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.